All right, Chapter 6. I had just done this video lecture and it came out much longer than I wanted it to be, so I'm going to redo it and hopefully condense it a little bit for you. So this is the idea of critical approaches, and when you look at the term critical approaches, it's not necessarily the idea of critiquing, it's really an examination of power. Critical theory is all about looking at power structures. And before they really dive into the conversation in the chapter, your authors make the argument that we have looked at a variety of different frames of reference for organizational communication in previous chapters. The early chapters, sort of that classical mindset, had this unitary frame of reference, and what that refers to is they were looking at what organizations had in common. And then it sort of shifted to this pluralist frame of reference, which argues that within an organization you have a lot of different constituent groups, each with a variety of different needs. For example, the human resources, human relations type of models, the idea of systems. The radical frame of reference is one that deals with oppression and deals with power and subjugation. And the critical theorist is one who takes that particular radical frame of mind. So now the roots of the critical theory come from Karl Marx, and Karl Marx obviously is known both for his political and philosophical beliefs, and he believed that critique would reveal the fundamental truth about human condition. That the influence of Marxist theory is widespread. Even nowadays, there's the Frankfurt School of Critical Theory, which is very influential in a lot of their writings. Critical theorists tend to agree on a variety of different things, one of which that there is an imbalance of power, and certain societal structures lead to this, where a certain race has the power, a certain gender has the power, and there are certain structures that lead to that. This imbalance of power leads to oppression, a subjugated class of people, to alienation, and most significantly, the critical theorists argue that it is up to them, it is up to the theorists to uncover these imbalances and therefore notify or inform the subjugated people or personnel that they are being subjugated, so that they can then go through the process of resisting. So again, like I said before, it's all about power, and very much about looking at the pervasiveness of power, and power is equated with control and domination. These particular approaches toward looking at power are all within the umbrella of critical approaches, and you can go to the book for some more detail. But specifically, power has to do with control. It has to do with who has control, how are things controlled, and what is controlled. Control of the modes and means of production. What is that? The mode being more or less how something's done. The things that are necessary, sort of the idea of a channel. This can look at the economic structures within an organization in order for productivity to occur. The means of production has to do with what actually happens on the floor. What are the processes that are needed in order to create the end product? Something on a conveyor belt system or along those lines. Control of discourse. This is the area, the purview that communication scholars focus on when they look at organizational communication from a critical point of view. So control of discourse is all about understanding that power relationships are created through dialogue, and maintained through dialogue, and occasionally overthrown through rhetoric or dialogue. They argue that there is an organizational reality that is constructed and maintained through communication. So get that. Let me say it again. There is an organizational reality that is created, sort of socially created, through discourse. And that's the element that Comm scholars will focus on. The idea of ideology and hegemony. Ideology obviously is the worldview or the perspective the fundamental view that exists within an organization. It structures the way that we think, it structures the way that we feel, and therefore very much influences our behaviors because it influences our perception of reality. Hegemony is that process by which a certain belief becomes accepted, sort of unquestioned. And so it's the process by which a dominant group leads another group to accepting subordination as, the accepted norm. In terms of emancipation and resistance, again, remember that the goal of the critical theorist is to shine the spotlight on these imbalances of power, these social structures that lead to this imbalance of power, and to expose them so that the oppressed person or people can then begin to fight off those. And so the goal of the critical model is emancipation. And so part of that involves this notion of resistance. I'm going to show you a short trailer of an old 1979 movie called Norma Ray with Sally Field. It gives you the idea of the kind of subject for a study from a theoretical or critical theorist point.
Norma Ray has been working since she was 16. She's been a mother since she was 18. She's been on her own since she was 20. Norma Ray is a survivor, and for the first time in her life, she's got a chance to become something more.
Good morning. Watch out, Steve. That guy looking good in the mouth.
A winner.
Good morning.
I've never met you before.
How you doing?
Fish out of water down here.
This is not exactly my native habitat.
If I joined up with you, would I lose my job?
No way.
I was never a very good Girl Scout. I'll go along with you.
You're the fish I wanted to hook.
20th Century Fox presents Norma Ray.
Norma, you got the biggest mouth in this mill. Give us a longer break. Give us more smoking time.
Do it, now shut up.
If you're in the State Department, we'd be in war.
Proving I think you like me.
Seriously.
No. But he's in my head.
You're going too far now, Norma. This here is our home.
How am I going too far?
There's a bunch of black men in there. You're going to get us in a whole lot of trouble.
I ain't never had any trouble with black men. The only trouble I ever had in my life was with white men.
Looks like you strayed off the reservation, Norma.
What the hell is going on around here?
They say she's made a porno movie with a local police officer. I don't believe this. Damn TV dinners, kids going around in dirty jeans. I'm going around, without! All together!
You know what I am. And you know that I believe. Standing up for what I think is right.
She's a free woman. Maybe you can live with it, maybe you can't.
This is the story of a woman with the courage to risk everything for what she knows is right.
Lee, I want you off the premises now!
I'm Shirley Benson, and I'm on prison.
I want you out of here right away.
Gonna take you and the police department and the National Guard to get me out of here.
Norma Ray.
Okay, so the idea of a theory of concerted control, again, definitely from a critical theorist perspective, and definitely a critical approach. Concerted control has to do with leadership and looking at the communication within leadership and how that functions. Edwards did a study that looked at different strategies that exist for exerting control, whether it's simple control, technological control, bureaucratic control. Looked at team-based leadership and how that worked. Another aspect of critical approach is the idea of identification and discipline. Identification is how an individual defines themselves in terms of the collective organizational whole. How well your own identity gets tied up with the organizational identity. Discipline has to do with rewards and punishments and looking at how those work. Feminist theories examine power structure along gender lines, and a lot of scholars have looked at this issue, particularly more recently. In Edley's study, it's interesting. At a female-owned business, there was a lot of rhetoric about women's rights, but in this particular study, they found that it still followed the same patriarchal, male-dominated norms, despite all the rhetoric to the contrary. In Trethewey's study, they looked at nonverbal communication, body types, makeup, clothing, in terms of ways to communicate femininity. Really interesting. Now, what is the research methodology within a critical approach? Both quantitative and qualitative, in terms of the way they really try to pick apart and examine the ideology. And the idea of deconstructionism is when they take a particular ideology or particular theory and then they try to extract one particular theme out of it and then see what happens. The whole goal with deconstruction is to identify what the critical themes are within a particular worldview or a particular ideology. Okay, so that's it. I think it's about 4 minutes shorter than my first version of the lecture. See you next chapter.